you're purchasing anything, a person will be giving you the receipt. That receipt will be called as invoice. That means that is the document what you are receiving by the supplier for purchasing any product or services. Under GST, a tax invoice is an important document. It not only evidences the supply of goods or services, but also essential document for the recipient to avail input tax credit. Instead of charging 12%, he charged 18%. So he collected extra 6%. Now for collecting this extra 6%, you can raise the credit note and you can credit the amount to your account. Hello everyone, I am Arun Kumar, lecturer in Department of Commerce and Management, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. Dear students, welcome to this new session number 1 on unit number 4, that is GST assessment. Yes, dear students, this particular session we are going to discuss about what is this all GST assessment and what and all the concepts we are going to study in the GST assessment. So if you look into this particular unit, firstly we have a concept called tax invoice under this particular unit, that is GST assessment. So here we are going to learn about what is tax invoice and why it is important under the GST purview, and what and all the contents will be there in the tax invoice and in what way the tax invoice looks like, and also we are going to learn about what is credit note and what is debit note. So now let us start the discussion by knowing the meaning of invoice. So we all know invoice in general. What is invoice? Yes, if you are purchasing anything, a person will be giving you the receipt. That receipt will be called as invoice. That means that is the document what you are receiving by the supplier for purchasing any product or services, right? It is a document received by the recipient by the supplier for purchasing of any the goods or the services, that will be called as in general receipt or a invoice. And yes, obviously it is very much important in case if there is any defect in the product, if the product is damaged, to return that product, obviously you are supposed to be in the possession of invoice, then only you can return that the damaged product to the actual owner of the product, that is for the seller. So what the sentence says or what the explanation says about the meaning of invoice. So an invoice is a commercial instrument issued by a seller to a buyer. Yes, here it is understood that invoice is a commercial instrument. It is a commercial instrument, that is which is used for the business purpose, which is issued by the seller to a buyer. That is the basic meaning, and it identifies both the trading parties and lists, describes and quantifies the items sold. Yes, first here this invoice is going to identify both the trading parties. So here who are all the trading parties? Yes, two parties will be there, that is the buyer and the seller. So here the buyer will be called as recipient. This person is called recipient and the seller is called the seller or the supplier. So in an invoice, you can easily find out both the parties, that is who is purchasing and who is selling the product, and also it shows you the date of purchase, okay, what and all items you are purchasing and how many units of items you are purchasing, whether you are only purchasing one unit. For example, if you are purchasing pen, only blue ink pen you are purchasing or both blue ink and red ink, how many pens, whether you are purchasing only one pen or two pen, and 10 pens or 20 pens, each pen cost how much, for 20 pens what is the total cost, and if the supplier is giving any offer, what is the offer discount given by the supplier. About each and every aspect the invoice is going to give you the details. Okay, so invoice is nothing but it is a commercial instrument which is issued by the supplier or by the seller to the recipient or to the buyer of the product or services. And in invoice, we are going to identify the details with respect to the traders and the details with respect to the items sold and the number of quantities you purchased, the amount charged for that particular product, and also about the total amount a particular buyer is supposed to pay for purchasing of the product. About all these aspects, the information will be there in invoice. So that is the meaning of invoice in general. So moving further, invoice under GST. So in general, we got to know what is the meaning of invoice. So according to GST, under the GST purview, what is the meaning of invoice? So if you look into that, the meaning of invoice with respect to GST. So under the GST regime, an invoice or tax invoice means the tax invoice referred to in section 31 of the CGST Act 2017. So this particular tax invoice comes under section 31 of the CGST Act 2017. This section mandates the issuance of invoice or a bill of supply for every supply of goods or services. So according to section 31 of the CGST Act of 2017, it is mandatory to all the registered suppliers. That means the persons who are selling the goods and services, all the registered suppliers, it is mandatory to everyone that they are supposed to issue invoice or a bill of supply to the recipient of the goods or services. The GST law mandates that any registered person buying goods or services from an unregistered person needs to issue a payment voucher as well as a tax invoice. That means, for example, you are a registered dealer, you are purchasing. In common, in general, who is supposed to issue the invoice? Yes, obviously the person who is selling the product is supposed to issue the invoice. Okay, you go to a shop, you are a customer, you ask him to give you, one product. Let us say you are purchasing one calculator and you paid 100 rupees. Now who is supposed to issue the invoice? Yes, obviously the seller, the shopkeeper is supposed to issue the invoice. In case if the shopkeeper is an unregistered dealer, if he is not registered with the GST purview, then the buyer, if the buyer is a registered dealer, then buyer can raise the tax invoice and he has to raise the tax invoice. That is the procedure what we have under the GST purview. So here under the GST, invoice is nothing but it is a mandatory under section 31 of the CGST Act 2017 that every seller of the product is supposed to issue the invoice to the recipient. In case if the seller is an unregistered dealer, if buyer is a registered dealer, then the registered dealer is supposed to raise the tax invoice. Moving further, the importance of tax invoice under GST. So you pay the amount and you purchase the product. Why you require tax invoice? What is the need of tax invoice? What is the importance of tax invoice? Why we need it? Right? So we are paying, is giving the product finished, no? Why we required it? Or as a manufacturer or as a business entity, why I require tax invoice? What is the need? Yes, there is a need. It is very much important to a business entity to take the invoice or to receive the invoice from the seller in certain scenarios. Because in future, obviously, if you want to claim some input tax credit, or if you want to return the products, or if you want to show the date of time of supply, for everything, this invoice, that is the tax invoice, is going to act as a base. It is going to act as a base for few scenarios in the furtherance of the business. So now if you look into why it is important, firstly, it is very important under GST. A tax invoice is an important document. It not only evidences the supply of goods or services, but also essential document for the recipient to avail input tax credit. Yes, tax invoice, it is just not an invoice to the recipient, that is for the buyer. It is also a very, very, very important document to claim the input tax credit. For example, you are a manufacturer. You are going to purchase some raw materials for the furtherance of the business. So you are eligible to claim ITC. Only you are eligible to claim ITC if you are in the possession of the tax invoice, or else you are not eligible to claim the input tax credit. So that is why in order to claim the input tax credit, obviously you are supposed to be in the possession of tax invoice. So that is why the tax invoice is very much important under the GST purview. That is the first importance why we require the tax invoice. Second thing, a registered person cannot avail input tax credit unless he is in the possession of tax invoice. Yes, as I said, without in the possession of tax invoice, as a registered person, you cannot claim input tax credit, that is ITC. So if you want to claim ITC, obviously you are supposed to be in the possession of tax invoice. GST is chargeable at the time of supply. So invoice is an important indicator of the time of supply. So yes, here to impose tax or to collect the tax, time of supply is most important. Okay, based on the time of supply, we are going to decide when to pay the tax, everything. So for that, this tax invoice is going to be act as a base. How? Yes, because the date of payment or the date of sale, date of dispatch, whatever, everything will, the date of generate of invoice, everything will be mentioned in the tax invoice. So for this many purpose, tax invoice is very much important. So without tax invoice, you are not going to get few facilities like input tax credit facility, and also you are not going to get to know what is the date of time of supply. So these are the important, the things which you are supposed to be know, why you are supposed to be in the possession of tax invoice. Moving further, the contents of invoice. So what and all the contents will be there in the invoice? Okay, what and all the contents will be there in the invoice? For example, you go to a mall, you are going to purchase a t-shirt. Let us take the example of that. You are going to purchase a t-shirt and you go to a billing counter. Okay, you pay 1000 rupees and he will give you the bill, right? So that bill includes of what and all the content will be there in that bill. That is the content of tax invoice. That's it. You need not to worry much. You go to a shop, you are going to purchase things and he will be giving you the bill. What and all the contents will be there in that bill. For example, name of the company, price of the product, what product you are purchasing, actual price, and what is the discount given, what is the price after discount. Every information will be there now. That thing is called the content of invoice. So now we look into the each and every point, that is what and all is going to be there in tax invoice. First and foremost thing in the tax invoice, you are going to find the name, address and GST number of the supplier. Yes, obviously here in the tax invoice, first you are going to get to know which company is selling the product and address of the company and GST and number of the company, that is the seller, the supplier. So if you are purchasing from Decathlon, you will see Decathlon address, that is where the particular store is located, and you will find the GSTN number in the starting of the bill, in the header of the bill. Second thing, a consecutive serial number in one or multiple series containing alphabets and numerals or special characters like hyphen or dash and slash. Yes, this is with respect to the GSTN number. GSTN number is inclusive of both the alphanumerical format. So few number will be like, for example, H345 ADM23. So let us take this example. So let us assume this is the GSTN number. So GSTN number is a mix of both alphabetic and numerical numbers. So you'll find the alphanumerical numbers, that will be your GSTN number, that is the supplier's GSTN number. Next, the date of its issue, that means in what date the receipt is generated, what date the product is sold, that will be mentioned in the GST invoice. Next, name, address and GSTN number of registered of the recipient. In case if the recipient is a registered person, GSTN number will be mentioned, or if is not a registered person, the name and address and phone number of the recipient, that is the buyer, will be mentioned in the tax invoice. Next, name and address of the recipient and the address of delivery will be mentioned along with the pin code, which state, which district, which taluk, everything will be mentioned with respect to the recipient and with respect to the address of delivery, to which place the item is supposed to be delivered and for whom it is supposed to be delivered, that will be mentioned. Next, HSN code of the goods or accounting code of services. So there is a unique code given for each and every product, the HSN code. That HSN code will be mentioned. If you are purchasing the t-shirt, so what is the code given to that particular t-shirt? That code will be mentioned in the receipt. And description of goods or services, that means what item you are purchasing. T-shirt, round neck t-shirt you are purchasing, that is the description. Round neck t-shirt, then the HSN code, and then the amount of that particular product. Next, here you can see quantity in case of goods or units or unique quantity code thereof. That means how many units you are purchasing, whether you are purchasing only 1 t-shirt, 10 t-shirt, like that, they are going to mention how many units you are purchasing. Next, total value of supply of goods or services or both. For example, if you are purchasing 10 items, what is the total value for the 10 items? That will be mentioned in the product. If each item costs 100 rupees, for example, so 100 into 10, you will get 1000, right? So 1000 will be the total value of the product. Next, taxable value of supply of goods or services or both, taken into account the discount or abatement, if any. So if any discount is given, after the discount, what is the total taxable value? Let us say the value is 1000 rupees now here. So 1000 into 10% discount I had given. So the 10% will be like 100 rupees. So in 1000 minus 100, you'll get the balance of 900. That 900 will be the taxable value. And what is the rate of tax applicable on the product? And the amount of tax charged in respect of taxable goods or services. So for example, here we have 900 rupees, that is the taxable value. On that 900 rupees, we will be charging, let us say, 6% and 6%, totally 12% GST. Okay, on 900 we will be charging 6% CGST, 6% GST, totally 12% we will be charging. Next, the place of supply along with the name of state. That means the place of supply, from where they are supplying the particular goods, and the state, from which state they are supplying. In case of supply in the courts of interstate trade or commerce, that means if the transaction is happening between two states, then they'll be mentioning from where the goods is supplied, from which state the goods is supplied. That will be mentioned in the tax invoice. And the address of delivery, where the same is different from the place of supply. Here, the address of delivery, where the same is different from the place of supply. So from where the place of supply, if the address of delivery is different, then the address of delivery will be mentioned. Next, whether the tax is payable on reverse charge basis. In case if the tax is payable on reverse charge basis, that is also supposed to be mentioned in the tax invoice. Next, the signature or digital signature of the supplier or his authorized representative. So here in the tax invoice, at the last, you are supposed to sign, that is the supplier is supposed to sign, whether the digital signature or the normal signature, that should be there in the tax invoice. So these are all the contents of tax invoice, and this all the informations are supposed to be there in a valid tax invoice. Then only that invoice is considered for claiming the input tax credit or for any other purposes. Next, moving further, so credit note. So what is this credit note? So we have two types of notes, that is credit note and debit note. So first get to know what is credit note, then we discuss about the debit note. So credit note, in cases where tax invoice has been issued for a supply and subsequently it is found that the value or a tax charge in the invoice is more than actually payable or chargeable, or where the recipient has returned the goods, the supplier can issue a credit note to the recipient. So here, for example, you purchased a product. Let us say you purchased one TV. You purchased TV and the cost of TV is 10,000. Okay. You purchased TV, the cost of TV is 10,000. But what supplier did? Supplier charged charged how much? He charged 12,000. Okay, the cost of TV is 10,000, but the supplier charged 12,000 and he raised the invoice also. Okay, but after the sales, you get to know that the actual cost is 10,000, not the 12,000. So at that time, what he can do? He can raise the credit note and he can credit the excess of 2,000 what is collected to your account. Okay, he is supposed to charge 10,000, but in some scenario he charged 12,000. Now he can raise the credit note and he can remit 2,000 rupees of excess amount what he collected to your account. Or let us say he is supposed to charge 12% of GST, but he charged 18% of GST. So now what will happen? Now we can raise the credit note. For example, instead of charging 12%, he charged 18. So he collected extra 6%. Now for collecting this extra 6%, he can raise the credit note and he can credit the amount to your account. So credit note is nothing but in case if the supplier is charging more than the actual price of the product, or if he is charging more than the actual rate of GST, then at that time he can raise the credit note and he can remit or credit the amount, whatever the excess amount he collected from the customers. And also, if the customer is returning the product to the supplier, at that time also the supplier can raise the credit note. So that's it with the credit note. It is not a very big confusing thing. It is very simple. If the particular supplier is collecting more than what is supposed to collect, then at that time you raise the credit note. Next, what is this debit note? So debit note is nothing but like opposite to credit note. So here the particular supplier is supposed to charge 12,000 rupees. Okay, he is supposed to charge 12,000, but he charged only 10,000. Okay, now still he is supposed to collect how much? Extra 2,000 rupees from the buyer. Okay, so now what he will do? He issue a debit note to the buyer by stating that I am supposed to charge 12,000, but I charged only 10,000. So now please pay me the extra amount what you are supposed to pay, that is rupees 2,000. So here in debit note, the particular supplier is supposed to charge a higher rate of tax or more value, but he charged less than actually what he is supposed to charge. So he charged less than actually what he is supposed to charge. So that is why what he will do, he raise the debit note to the customer. So that is what the statement says. In cases where tax invoice has been issued for supply and subsequently it is found that the value or tax charged in that invoice is less than what is actually payable or chargeable, the supplier can issue debit note to the recipient. That means if the supplier charges less than what is supposed to charge, okay, less than what is supposed to charge, at that time we can issue the debit note to the customer or to the recipient. So this is the difference between the credit note and the debit note. So with this, I'm going to wind up this session and I'll come up with few more new topics in the upcoming session. Until then, thank you all. Have a nice day. Namaste.